official welcome to our November meetup, which today is about Ask an Expert. Now I want to throw a question at you. What can we do when sprints are poorly planned and most stories don't get delivered?
Actually, I saw this question, and there were actually a couple that were related around not completing sprints, right? Um, I don't know if you remember what my go-to is. It is 100% my go-to. Is the question that I always ask first. Who attends your sprint reviews? Who attends your sprint reviews? In most cases, the others say, "Oh, we don't have a sprint review." Well, and the other one is, "Oh, the product owner attends." And we're like, what? But who outside the team? Like, what's the most senior person that attends that? And the reason for that is like, the plan is not that important. But if we're okay with work not being completed in a sprint or getting to some form of definition of done, we're just going to perpetuate that. We're just going to repeat it. There's this thing I always would like to talk about as well is you can't hold someone accountable. Like, how do you hold someone accountable, right? People need to hold themselves accountable, but to do that, they need to be given responsibility and autonomy, which is planning, and they need to be given a consequence, right? So I don't mean like, have stakeholders come in and shout and whip the team, but the decisions that a team makes when they've got autonomy, right? They need to know how this impacts the business. So they should have visibility on things like roadmaps, on strategy, on how them missing this particular deadline impacts other things further down the value chain. Um, and again, not in a we're going to shout at you or rap you on the knuckles. But the more context you have, the better you're going to behave in terms of how you're going to show up, how you're going to make your plans. So that's my go-to is look at the sprint review first, and then from there you can always jump around. What about you, Malene?
Well, I'll see a different anti-pattern in this one. Just to read it up again, what can we do when sprints are poorly planned?
Mm,
the we are responding to change or following a plan, right? Like the whole anti-pattern, are we actually changing the way we work? So a lot of things I see in companies is the thing about we still stuck on the task we have to get done and forgot to
mm,
answer what's the value we're delivering here.
mm,
In that sense, like I see many teams just, oh, the plan was poorly planned, so let's plan even more. Well, the whole thing about being Scrum is to be allowed to respond to change.
mm,
I think, and most stories don't get delivered. Firstly, I would see and look at the data. Have we overcommitted the last 5 sprints and start undercommitting? Well, I always say rather undercommit and overdeliver than overcommit and underdeliver. It's about the relationship to your stakeholder, Bevan, as you also mentioned, right?
mm,
Like if you last 5 sprints have come into a sprint review and saying we didn't deliver again, what does your stakeholder feel like, right? Rather
mm,
come and say we delivered all and you got more. Then there's a whole different environment you're creating. So one of the things I firstly do is saying let's just underdeliver to start with. Like if you can't, so often the question I say, like, if you haven't delivered for the 5 sprint, can you just give me one thing at least? Let's just
mm,
say we're doing this little one thing. People say, no, we can't do that. That's the other aspect of it. Are you still stuck on your waterfall Gantt chart planning, right?
mm.
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of anti-patterns into this actually. Are we changing the way we work or are we
Mm.
actually just stuck in the old way of working with some agile words on it?
Yeah, so very good point. I mean, I see the question, Chubba, that you're busy typing there. That is like such a common thing, right? We don't have enough people, and there's just more stuff being thrown in. And again, that there's some hints in that as well. For that whole accountability, self-managed thing to work, the team must have the autonomy to choose what goes into their fixed time period, right? But aligned to a particular goal. And that goal needs to be aligned with whoever's pushing the work in, right? And I've seen this in a lot of companies, particularly where product owners aren't part of the team. They have it as a side function. They're like some senior business person somewhere that has a side job, side hustle as a product owner for a team. And they're used to just giving direct orders. Um, so we know from the world of project management that if you fix time and cost, which is generally your people as well, and scope, then you're going to impact quality, which is likely what's happening when people are trying to rush through things as well, right? So yeah, that's always the starting point. So I mean, the sprints in variable process is generally designed to fix time and fixed cost, which means that we have to vary scope. So that planning that we do is ensuring that we're going to the right outcome, but the actual work we do on a day by day should be able to change. And that's a very big conversation to be having with whoever's representing that accountability of product owner, and the business themselves, saying, hey, can we try this for 2 weeks? We'll bring you back into our sprint review and then we'll see how it goes. This is your governance if they're a very project management heavy languaged organization. Yeah, I don't know if that helps,
But
Trevor.
it actually goes into the two question. Go for it, Chaba.
Uh, Sorry to interrupt, just wanted to add some background that some people from our team went on longer longer period for not holiday, but for sick leave or such, or maternity leave or whatever. And the problem is that the workload and the delivery is still expected, the same workload and delivery. We have the product owner, it's fine, but constantly the business is saying that customer is a priority, and we need to prioritize always the customer, and the customer is the first. And like this, we have a plan, for example, on our board, uh, and then simply the product owner comes and says that, okay, throw away, push away all the other topics, put it back to the backlog, and let's start working on the most the highest priority first. So basically, the sprint planning became obsolete in this sense. So what can we do in such a situation? How to
Malene, you want to go first?
I think
Guess where my answer's going.
I think, yeah.
Mm.
Again, it's back to, I feel like I repeat myself, people don't change, right? So we have this thing about, oh, we still have the old mindset of saying we are stuck on the output we need to do, and then we will force it through. So was it 2 weeks ago, I spoke at a panel where we talked about AI and the future and humans. And I find like many companies has not understood this whole thing as saying, like, how do we create an environment for the humans? And when I say that, it's like, yeah, we talk a lot about it, but nobody really does it. So into the whole challenge there, is there data that shows what your team actually can deliver? And is there a person that stands up, hint the product owner, to say, this is what the team can do, and this is what you want? So what I often also see is our product owner is not educated enough to have the right conversation. They always think like, oh, I can just push more work, or I need to write good requirements. No, the product owner is that middleman to understand about what can my team do and how do I drive the most value in the capacity my team have. So that's the negotiation of saying, oh, stakeholders, you want all of this, but my team can only do 5. You're asking for 20. Something here is not mixing up. Now, the old school is, no, they just have to do it, right? But then we know it's a risk of not delivering anything, poor quality, burnout. Like, it's all of these things. So it's fun when I talk with companies and they ask, like, why agile? Why should we change? I said, well, what you've done so far, has it worked for you? Like, then they laugh a little bit, right? And it's like, but so the famous quote, right? Do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome is the description of insanity. And still we do that. So we're missing that whole thing that people actually stop me up and think, this doesn't work. How can we do it differently? Did you want to add something, Bevan?
Yeah, Trevor, I wanted to say one of my favorite quotes in the world is if we have data, let's look at data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine, by James Barkdale. And the reason I love that quote is, again, the challenge that you experience. I literally had this conversation this week at work. So there's two things that came up when you were through the example. Number one is, how are we showing the impact of that, right? So I always like to use, like, imagine your backlog, it's a stack of plates. The top portion is what's in your sprint. Now oh, wow, Zoom's making me raise my hand. Something new comes in and they say, we're deprioritizing those things, right? cool, we can take them out and put something new in. But by the way, there's only, I don't know, 8 days of our 10-day sprint left, which means that instead of stepping 5 for 5, now you've got 5 for 4. And just very, very simple thing, right? The other part of that, so that's number one, is make it really visible. And that's, again, sprint review helps with that. But on a day-by-day basis, how do we get our product owners to have that same thinking all the time? It's this is our line. If they're expecting more than that and you've got data on past delivery, right? So then you can say, we have never met this expectation before. The chance of us doing it is actually very low. This is more realistic. And then linked to that, it's capturing data. So having had those kind of experiences with business people in the past, they'll be like, yeah, but you know, we're paying for it, just go and do it. So let's get them the money. So if you've got a fixed team and you've spent 6 days of your sprint, you can average out the general hourly rates and say, we spent, 6 days busy doing the refinement and some initial delivery or development of this. It's going to take us an extra day to be able to revert some of the changes we made. I'm just making stuff up. So therefore, it's cost you 7 days just to do nothing, to reprioritize. And we actually push that back to say, this is what the cost of rework is. And we don't want to be at the point where we never do rework, because to Malene's point, that's responding to change. We want to be able to at least have the conversation to say everything is a trade-off, right? If you want to push a new priority in, absolutely. You're the customer, right? You're the one that's going to be paying for it. But just know what you're losing, right? So is the value that you're gaining from these new items going to offset the cost of these items you're taking off the table, right? As well as the loss of those potential items values. So again, the more you get the business involved in this idea of this is what it's actually costing you, the more they can come along on this journey with you and realize, oh, wait a minute, okay, if the team says they can only deliver that much, then we trust them. Yeah.
That actually moves us into another question that came up on our board now. This question actually has two aspects of it, and I'm going to focus on the second version of it first. And that's the challenge of these what's called, when we take somebody from the team, putting on the Scrum Master role, and then not upskill them correctly. And the question is like, if they don't have facilitation skill, coaching skill, unable to coach which then leads to Scrum sucks. I actually think why I jumped to this question now is about, we have a different angle also that most Scrum Masters is actually missing. And that is to understand the flow of work and getting data. How does my team actually deliver? So yes, it's correct. Many Scrum Masters lack the skill of facilitation coaching and understand what does it actually mean. But on top of that, they don't even know how to measure themselves in the sense of how does my team deliver? Are they effective? Because as Scrum Master, you are there to drive effectiveness. But if you can't tell how effective you are, and that was back to the question, right? Like, how can we push back? Well, if you don't have the understanding on how effective you are as a team, you don't have data to show what can you actually do. So they go hand in hand, both being like project owner not being skilled enough to have the right conversation, but also the Scrum Master to not get the right data. And this is not about directly deliver. This is data on how do we effectively deliver. So how do we work? What can we actually do as a team? Those goes hand in hand. And maybe to embrace the whole question. So the question was, I would like to check my assumption that whenever people decide to take on Scrum Master, mostly it's the tester is becoming the Scrum Master. So just to make that statement, I actually don't see that. I mostly see the project manager becoming the Scrum Master, but it's the same problem. Somebody with a title already becoming the Scrum Master, and then they think Scrum Master is just putting meeting into calendars, as simplified right now. But it's a big, big challenge. I know, Bevan, you and me have had that conversation a lot, like this whole thing. Firstly, most companies misunderstand the Scrum Master role. And then secondly, they don't use time on upskilling the product owner, which meaning a lot of the product owner work still falls onto the Scrum Master / project manager, and we actually don't change anything. These are the things where it's like, back to the other challenge saying we don't meet deadline, we don't have overworked. Well, nothing has actually changed. You're probably working the same way with some new labels, but it doesn't change anything. And I think those are more critical for the future. I don't know if you want to add in some, Bevan.
Yeah, I wanna focus on the usually a female part because that is incredibly true. In South Africa especially, right? I always think my wife sometimes uses this language, blue jobs and pink jobs, and it absolutely is a thing. Because the Scrum Master role has become this administrative soft skills role, people generally pawn it off to women. I remember in a previous company we worked, we realized that we had an equal number of men and women. And whenever there was a social event to organize, it tended to default to the woman, right? And it was weird. It's this weird cultural thing. And the moment we realized that, we were very deliberate about changing that. But it is interesting, right? So it's that's a good question. Is chat being recorded? Is it being recorded? I don't see that.
Not the chat. No, it's not being
Okay.
recorded.
So yeah, good question. Yeah. So I just thought that was an interesting thing because it's something that we've definitely seen in the industry. That's just, I don't know if it's just a South African thing or not. We are a very men-dominated culture, especially in the world of work, right?
Well, I think on
yeah.
that case, right, we do have a special case in South Africa with women. I don't know, because now maybe just put it on the spot, but we had Agile women in Africa. Why is women in Africa needed if most was women? I don't know. I've more worked on enterprise level in the world. I think our biggest challenge here is not if it's a woman and a man. I think simply it's the misunderstanding of the role.
That's it.
And how people don't actually embrace it. And that's also the thing we see now, right? We see how companies now starting like, what is the value of a Scrum Master? Yeah, what is the value if it's just a person you expect to just put meeting into the calendar?
Yeah.
Like we really need to start upskilling on practical and stuff that actually makes a change to our business.
I want to give you like just a different perspective thing on the roles thing as well. So I always love the latest update on the Scrum Guide where they shifted from roles to there's a team and there's accountabilities within that. Because I like to ask people that have been in the industry for a long time to say, how did you start? How did you become a Scrum Master? Like, did you go on training and then you applied for a job? No. I became a Scrum Master like 3 years before I did Scrum training. Why? Because as a developer and our process sucked, right? So effecting the change from within you where you are, like I didn't know any of that coaching and facilitation stuff. That was that thing. But was I as effective as I could be? No, that's why I learned all that stuff. And I think there's this perception that, you know, from an agility growth perspective, we need to have all of these skills to be a Scrum Master. But to Malena's point earlier, you just need to know how value gets delivered and are you able to help a group of people deliver that, regardless of whether they're a perfectly formed, team of less than 10 people, regardless of whether you've got dedicated titles. So first 2 years of my career as a Scrum Master / developer was without a product owner, right? We had to create the role of product owner. But it's again, who is the person that we get the team to go to, who is the decision maker on the direction, right? And I think the more we can articulate that and see our role in that team, saying, how do we help the team move through this workflow? But keeping high quality and making sure it's effective, right? So not just efficient. Effective meaning that it also adds value. That's really, really important.
That made me think about a different anti-pattern, Bevan. Now, when you say you didn't have facilitation skills, like facilitation skills is powerful if you know how to use them. Why I'm saying that is because many people think like, oh, now Scrum Guy says I should facilitate as a Scrum Master, so now I have to facilitate everything. So, but nothing in Scrum Guide says you have to facilitate the sprint planning. Nothing in any of the events, it doesn't say, right? Again, a big misunderstanding saying like, oh, the Scrum Master should run it all. Now we haven't understand facilitation skills, which meaning now it becomes you standing there micromanaging everyone. Then you learn facilitation skills. Now you think you need to make every event as a facilitated thing you run. It's just like, like a lot of these events is so misunderstood, saying no, most of them is just alignment between team. It's a way we work because we have a need to it, right? And as a Scrum Master, you often actually get in the way. What we forget when we talk about facilitation and coaching skills as a Scrum Master is actually the observation and listening skills. There's key skills to be able to coach and facilitate. That I think those are the main skill you should actually grow to understand where you are ineffective as a team. Because by you observing and listening to what's actually going on, you can start collecting the data on where is it we ineffective. And I think those skills is often overseen. We think Scrum Master is there to be the one talking the most. And I say you should talk the least. Vinny, you have your hand up.
Yes, I would like to add. I believe the issue here is a lot of the scaffolding, management, leadership, whatever you want to call them. I think we're at a stage where I feel like I don't want to say that they don't understand. I think they don't want to understand and they think that they understand it. The issue is when the Scrum Master gets assigned teams, they don't get to operate in the way that they actually should be operating. For example, coaching the PO, coaching the team, and coaching the organization. Very rarely have I seen Scrum Masters coach the organizations, never mind Agile coaches or enterprise Agile coaches. That usually doesn't go there. And therefore, they are unable to impact the culture. So if they're not talking, they'll say, well, then what is your job as a Scrum Master? What are you doing? So it falls back to exactly that problem where, as human beings, we're all trying to show our worth and trying to keep our jobs.
Yeah.
People
gotta eat, man. People gotta eat.
But then we also have the other challenge of it, because so I often say like Agile coach, Scrum Master is the same thing. It's just because we're stuck in this hierarchy that we have to get promotions, right? And again, we see Scrum Master as a junior role, or companies does, which is another topic. I 100% agree with you, Vinny. The challenge is, and I know Bevan, you and me have worked on different companies together. The challenge often we see is everybody is too busy, right? We're too busy to change. We're too busy to prove we value, but we're too busy. And there, I think we as Agile practitioner community have failed in what we've been doing, in saying we too much actually tools and processes over individual interactions. I don't think we've had the right conversation, also because we're humans, right? So now, not to be too fluffy, but the whole thing I mentioned in my CSM training, I sometimes put it on the spot saying, to be the best Scrum Master or Agile coach, I believe you should be willing to want to lose your job, because else you can't challenge. But let's face it, I think 99% of people out there is not willing to lose their job because we have a need. So that's a fundamental challenge, right? Of saying, are we then the right people to actually drive the change in the organization if we're not willing to actually take the difficult conversation? So I personally have had those happening a couple of times for me, where I'm challenging companies, right, and where they being like, no, that's not what we want. But if nobody does it, we never change.
So it's actually triggered a thought, like it was a conversation I just had a few weeks back as well, where we're just talking about Agile, the industry in general, and the perceptions that come along with it, right? Go to any senior executive, right, anywhere, and just say, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear Agile coach? You can hear things like passive. You can hear things like,
they're just retrospective facilitators.
Yeah, fluffy is the word you hear a lot, right? That's it. And again, now in an organization that's under cost pressure, shareholder pressure, where delivery is king, how have we managed to create that perception for ourselves, right? Because all of that stuff that we do, the coaching, the facility, is all in, for the intent of effective delivery, right? I mean, our primary measure of progress is working software, working product, right? So when did we forget that, or when did we stop articulating that, right? The other thing that I always hear from senior leaders as well is, from an Agile point of view, to Malene, what Malene said, we focus on the processes. It becomes a us versus, right? So somewhere also we've lost this thing where even the waterfall in comparison to Agile, right? In terms of how do we deliver projects or programs, forget the product conversation for now. But even in terms of general delivery, right? It's defined process versus empirical process, right? And then there's sense making of when it works really, really well. But most Agilists, if you look online and see a lot of commentary, it's insulting or from a point of judgment on, oh, that's wrong. If you've got the title project manager, right? But is that incorrect? No, it's not, right? And I think there's this reckoning that's almost kind of hit the industry, which is kind of interesting to see in a certain regard. It's also a little bit scary because people got to eat, man. Can we get back to the basics of delivery? Like, can we go back to, the original intent of what we were trying to do in the first place, which was rebel against a, massively bureaucratic, heavy process and system? And can we find the efficiencies and effectiveness in the delivery? Which, yeah, is quite exciting for me.
I think that brings us actually into a different question we got asked that actually bear with me, but I want to tie it together. When joining a new organization, how do you know when it's okay to question or suggest changes to existing agile practices? So why I'm bringing that question into the conversation we have right now is this challenge of where do we come from? So the anti-pattern we see with most organizations, right, is a Scrum Master Agile coach come in with the Bible, not the Jesus Bible, the Agile Bible, right? And be like, but one of them. Oh, but this is what it says. You should do stand up like this. You should do it like that. And nobody likes that. Nobody likes that. So I'm like, I do understand if it's from that aspect, it can feel uncomfortable. But for me, that's not how we should approach it. For me, the way I always start into company is start getting data. How do they deliver? And then I'm there to solve problems. I'm not there to make you stand up in the morning. I'm there to figure out what is the problem. And then I have a backpack full of tools where I would rather, oh, so our daily Scrum is not valuable for us, hey? It's actually a waste. What can we do to either make it valuable or change it? Because like I see all the agile frameworks also are like those that's guidance as the perfect world, like the Scrum framework. I love it. It's like the perfect world of most effective way of working. But the challenge is most of us doesn't work in the perfect world. So our role as a Scrum Master Agile coaches is not to come in with the Bible and say, this is how we should do it. No, our job is actually to outline, create transparency for the challenge we faces so we can inspect and adapt. And thereby we would have data that will prove what is actually the problem. It's not my opinions. It's data shows this is a challenge. Here's some suggestions on what we could do to try solve it as an experiment way. Let's see and let's measure if it works or not. That way, if you focus on actually solving people's problem, they are also more likely to change. Rather than just, oh, let's do it for the sake of it. Vinny, go for it.
Yeah. So I feel, and I would also like to invite Nadia and is it Saba as well to pitch in. I feel like it's all back to the same root cause where it's the understanding of they don't want to understand what the job role entails. Like you're saying, Malene, the issue is you keep getting people fresh out of college or, like a first job, graduate agile coach, graduate Scrum Master. If you want them to influence and change the culture and as you say, Malene, look for value and find help your team, you really need to be at a certain level, a certain point, certain experience in your career. You talk about also the, like me and Sally Slowly always says, every good agile coach has been fired before because you stood for something that you believed in and you did your job. And these kind of, I would say, characteristics will form in certain individuals that have the experience. Like even if you look at it, if you want to coach leadership, you want to coach a product person, you need to have been in similar situations or job roles at some point of your life, right? Like, can you imagine like just having someone just out of school becoming your Scrum Master? Like really? And And you know what? There are jobs out there. You have seen them advertised.
So I partly agree with you. I agree with the last part. I agree with you. A Scrum Master is not a junior position, but I don't want to sit back and saying they need to understand, they need to make the environment. I'm saying like, what can we do in the environment we are? So even if you're a junior Scrum Master, start to focus on the challenge, because what I've seen over and over again in company, nobody likes change. I don't like change. I like to keep it the same. We're humans, right? Which meaning it's not about the change. Can we actually stop having that conversation? I think I had at a coach camp once, we had the conversation saying it's not about change, it's about getting better. What does that mean? That means let's explore the challenge that the company faces. That can be done on any level. Yes, as a junior Scrum Master team level, you are not going to change the company. But what can you then do for your team level? And instead of being, what I often see is these Scrum Masters standing and saying, no, you have to do stand-up, it has to take 15 minutes. Now we're over time. We need to take this conversation offline, right? I'm like, what a waste. You're not focusing on the right thing. Let's first explore the data and understand the challenge our team are facing. And then take, I love the example of the elephant, right? How do we eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We can't solve it all. If we think Agile is an end destination, we think it wrong. It's about continuously improvement, which meaning, what is that one thing we can do tomorrow to get better? And yes, then I do believe there needs to be some senior people that can change an organization. But that's not, right now it is not and will not be the Scrum Master of the perception in the world.
Yeah, and to just build on that, Malene, like, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. And it reminded me of, there was so I want to say it was written like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. John Spruce had an article called, or he like had this whole connection that said, what's the collective noun for Agile coaches? And he called it an argument, right? And that's the problem, is that within the Agile space, there is gatekeeping, there is opinions, right? Coming from people that have never run a business. And I'm talking about an enterprise business that we're trying to change. And there's almost this humility that I feel like us as Agile coaches and Scrum Masters need to have, right? We are there to do a job, right? Either we get ourselves in a position where we can get fired, in other words, where we are having the challenges and we're really pushing for the organization. Organizations have never fired people that they see adding value while changing their culture, right? Politics does that, by the way, not organizations, right? What about the other side of it? Well, what if you're a Scrum Master and you just need to eat, all right? Do the job, right? You're going to upset yourself. So I love that. I can't remember, the happiness trap. Happiness is defined as or unhappiness is defined as the difference between expectations and reality. And I think this is where, as Agilists, we drive ourselves mad because we have this picture in the world of what we want it to be, and we get frustrated that the current world is not there, without going, hey, that's an ambition. What can we do to get there, right? So literal feedback I've received from people that aren't in Agile, for Agile coaches, is we're too theoretic, right? That comes up a lot. We're not focusing on delivery, right? It's all made up, right? What about X, Y, Z as part of project governance? All these kind of things that are the practical day-to-day things. How are we speaking to those, right? So there's that kind of thing. It's that difference between Agile and agility kind of thing. And it's just, I love these conversations because, there's no right answer or wrong answer. There just is,
It keeps reminding me about Bevan, the saying from Kanban, right? Start where you are. Like, we can't solve all the problems tomorrow. And that's what I also do in my trainings. They're saying about, it's not about the perfect world. It's about, can we become a bit better tomorrow? Yes, we need to know about the perfect world, because else we have nothing to steer towards, right? And as you say, like, if this is nirvana, how do we take a step to get there? And then measure it. Is this the right thing for us or not? So there's quite a lot of questions on these delivery. How can we improve visibility? That's what I'll come back to. How can we get stakeholder alignment? A lot of them comes like, how can we make them? Now I'm summing it a little bit up in the tone of the question, right? And again, go back to this. We shouldn't make anybody. We need to, like, I love the technique of the 5 whys, right? Why do we do this? ask whys until we get down to the root cause. The same we can do with the problem with things. Like, why is it our stakeholder is not aligned? Why is it our program management stakeholders? How can we get stakeholder aligned with agile program management practices? So a lot of it is how can we do it to them instead of understanding, yeah, but why should we do it? Understand what is it actually we're trying to achieve? Back to Bevan, when you said the day-to-day. What is going on day-to-day right now that we can improve? And that's back to if we actually add value in the sense of be there to create better effectiveness. And we have a lot of different tools that can do that and help doing that, then we also add value instead of just focusing on oh, you have to do it as the book says.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's I mean, we always go back, we literally spoke about it just before we started open the call, was Agile doesn't solve your problems, it shows you your problems. Well, technically it's the Scrum is the quote, but same thing. It's this MRI machine, right? Anything that wasn't working before we started working, or bringing Agile practices and stuff in, is still not going to be working, right? It's what can we do to solve it, right? So within control and within influence. Right. So my favorite way of influence, transparency and data, right? Hey, you're the business owner, because I see these one company owners who do top-down product planning. There is no wrong way. If they're running a successful company and they're happy with their return on investment and their, return on net asset value, good, it's their risk. If their name's on the director's signature, guess what? They can go to jail if they're not compliant, right? You do not have that risk as a Scrum Master and Agilist. So that's what we need to, that's the mindset for me at least, where I've realized we start adding a lot more value, because now we can actually take it back and say, hey, I think that if we ran, more regular releases, this is where we could cut out a massive amount of waiting time while sitting in a queue for this. Can we find a way to do this? Here are some patterns that have existed, that have worked for us in the past. What would you like to do? Right? And for those of you that have done coaching, mentoring, you would have heard that question works very similar, right? This is what I'm seeing. These are the options or patterns I've seen before. What would you like to do? And if they say, I don't want to do anything about it, it's their decision, right? Does it suck? Absolutely it does. But there are other battles, right? There are going to be other places, because as long as they're aware of it and you've made it transparent and they made the decision, they own it. Right, they can make that. Yeah.
I think there's two other questions that I think is quite interesting for today's talk. How can we improve visibility across team and work? So we've done in that situation a lot of time. Hey, Bevan. I think firstly I would start with the anti-patterns. Like I see these scrum of scrums. Doesn't work. And why I say so is again our a misunderstanding of saying of the Scrum Master need to understand everything and understand everything. It's actually not correct. The Scrum Master is there for effectiveness. Your product owner is there to deliver the value. Which meaning when we talk time, scope, what did I forget? Budget, cost, all of those should be your product owner focus. So I always laugh when we say Scrum, let's get all Scrum Masters together to talk about what they're delivering. That's you're talking about your product backlog. Who is accountable for product backlog management? That's your product owner. It should be a product owner conversation. Again, companies are bad at upskilling product owner to actually do their job. That I see as a big risk. So what have we done? How can we improve visibility across teams and work? Firstly, make sure that is actually relevant for the teams. Like, who is that conversation actually relevant? Is it because team member has dependency on other team? Find your right audience. Don't just do something for the sake of it. What I mean by that, there's a lot of ways, for example, bringing all Scrum Masters together to talk about team. The teams are independent of each other. That's a waste. If they have dependency, yes, then there is value that the team has some sort of a tool maybe that can see it. I know, Ben, please correct me if you have other insights, but we have worked with Jira and Confluence to actually visible can take the Jira backlog and show it on the Confluence with some lines of dependencies. For me, it's all about create visibility. I've even done it in the office on a wall. I'm busy doing that with a client right now, right? Saying let's just create transparency about these things. Now, if it's a team level thing, focus on the team. But it could also be, so a different example I have is where it's project dependent on each other. And actually not team level because it's multiple different teams. Then you do it on a project level. So instead of just doing things for the sake of it, better understand who is the right audience for the information you need. And this takes time to actually do. And again, back to the Scrum Master, what are they actually doing? Well, they should not be driving delivery and value and ordering backlog and have delivery conversation about what adds value. That's your product owner. They should be doing stuff like, can we create work transparent so we can see the bottlenecks, so we can start getting data?
And just on that, because again, this is also such a common conversation. If the organization's expectation of you as a Scrum Master is to be that whip cracker, delivery manager kind of thing, it is risky to sit back and go, well, that's not my job, that's the product owner's job. All right. So normally what I tell teams is if the organization expects you to do that, one, clarify the assumptions. Actually have the conversation with line managers, with product owners, with people outside the team. Go up to them and literally ask the question, what do you think a Scrum Master, like when you hear Scrum Master, what should I be doing? What do you expect me to be doing? And write down your own expectations and say, well, okay, well, I expect to be doing this because this is what I was taught, or this is what has worked for me in the past. But you're expecting something radically different, right? Again, you, with what you know, just because you want it a different way doesn't mean it should be that way, right? The organization isn't there to change themselves for you. So you've got to meet them where they are, right? That's a Kanban principle. Meet them where they are. Go up to each of them and say, okay, these are the expectations. In a traditional environment, what works effectively, or at least in a modern environment, let's use that, what works effectively is if the person that is deciding on scope and budget, they're the one that actually creates this visibility. Why don't we work together? And I'll show you some techniques that have worked for me, right? So you're going to be doing it, and eventually you do it through them, and eventually you can step back and then let them do it, right? And that's kind of, people don't know they need to be a product owner if they haven't gone on training, or even if they have gone on training. Like if you're bringing experience in, that's what you've got to create, right? You've got to actually help guide people and empower them to be able to do that role. Yeah. So.
Now, there's also another question that I find interesting because I just had a talk about this last week. First, so I've changed the question a little bit because I wasn't 100% sure, but it changed into what's the right balance between working from home and being in the office for Agile teams?
Yes.
So why it was interesting was because the conversation, like we have a principle in Agile saying face-to-face conversation, right? Now, I always said that one is also based on over 67% of our language is body language. So of course, when we can see each other, it makes a huge difference. But with video, we can also see each other. Now, science does show, and also in my experience, right, the most effective way is to work, like be together in an office we can go up and write. Now, something that challenged my own thinking last week was, so also the way the question has been asked here, what is the right balance between working from home and being in the office for Agile teams? I don't think it's just Agile teams. I think now with the whole AI coming in, I talk more and more about how do we create an environment for people. So if we just black and white look at what's the most effective way of working, well, that is together in a room, right? But now, so I took looking here in South Africa, I'm based in Cape Town, where there is a lot of traffic. So in the peak hour, something that should take 15 minutes takes you nearly 45 minutes to get. So there I realized if we start to look at it from a human perspective, yes, maybe science, black and white, says the most effective way is to work in the office, but that's because it's like not seeing on the surroundings. Then if I ask myself, would I be most effective working in an office if I have been sitting 1 hour in traffic and has to sit 1 hour in the traffic on the way home also? Now, suddenly we have more parameters into this whole equation that actually count into this as a human. So I don't think there's a black and white answer for it. I think, and what the actual conversation came from, was saying we need to talk more about how do we want to work as a team. So instead of put it into boxes, oh, this is best for Agile team. No, what is best for your team based on where you're based? How do you work? How do you communicate? If you're remote, do you still actually put video on? For example, I see many teams being remote and then never put videos on. I definitely don't believe that's good for your team culture. What do we do if we work remote to enhance our team culture? I wish that we talk much more about individually as a team, how do I work best? And then establish that, rather to say, no, all agile teams should work like this. Because I believe in the future, it's much more important to create environments for humans. Bevan, go for it.
I need to Bevan something. So the latest research on that the ones that I've read, it's not all of it. There was a paper, I'm just trying to find the link, about in-person versus hybrid versus fully remote. And what they settled on, the conclusion of it was its flexibility.
Yes.
Right, we've done it all the time. The people want flexibility. So the reason I brought this up is because this is something we speak about a lot. I mean, if you work in an organization, they've most likely got a RTO, right, return to office somewhere along the line, and they'll say, oh, it's 3 days a week or 5 days a week or whatever it is. Again, to the previous point, it's an organizational constraint, right? So as a team, because this gets abused a lot. I don't want to say used, it gets abused a lot. Oh, we're agile, we can make up all our own rules. Not if you work in an organization where you're not the boss and it's not your money. So where it is, and there are constraints. So I think it was Sonia Blechner that had this picture on LinkedIn once that showed it so nicely. So Malene, to give you a visual, like, you know, there's a here, there, we're here, we want to get there. There's almost like an addition that says on the bottom, there's a line in that direction, which is organizational constraints. So constraints that we cannot change, right? Location of people, location of offices, their work from home policy, their all these things. Those are organizational constraints. Maybe you're a Mac person, but this place only allows PC or vice versa. Who knows? Organizational constraints, right? If we keep fighting those, we're going to get exhausted, right? Especially if we start shifting the team, right? So now it's not to say we don't challenge them, but we've got to use data to challenge them, right? And it's a lot harder to change those. Then in the front, where the there is, that's another constraint, right? Because by creating a vision, we have constrained what the future looks like on purpose. So we don't just do everything. And then on top, which forms like a little, reverse funnel kind of thing, a little cone. The top kind of constraints are essentially a dotted line, right? Those are the self-made constraints. Those are things like saying we're going to operate in a 2-week iteration or sprint, right? We made it up, right? Like all the rules. So we've made that up. And then we need to test it, right? Do we keep hitting these constraints over and over again? What needs to change? Right? If we keep hitting the work from home thing the whole time, who can we influence? Who can we speak to? Right? Is it only our team? Is it the entire organization? Does it matter? Right? So if you work as part of a large organization, most likely the board or someone has decided that along with, your senior executives, right? You could waste energy trying to solve it, or you can find ways of operating within those constraints, right? Maybe there are other levers that we can pull. And again, if we don't have data, it's just going to be the interpersonal stuff. And because we're working so closely with people, we run the risk of taking on everyone else's emotions, right? So it's more of that, sometimes we've got to be able to step away and look at this big picture and be like, where are we, right? Is this a constraint I can change or not? What else can we do? So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Remember, opinions, everyone has them.
So it's definitely not black and white. It is staying the constraints, but also understand the people, right? And I do like when you say the data, right? Can we get data that shows that's the best part to help change something if our constraints is not to help change some of the constraints, hopefully. I think that's it of what we will get to today of questions.
It has been already.
It has. I hope it had value to you. Please feel free to pop us a message if there's a specific topic you would like us to talk about in the future. Else thank you for joining us. And
thanks for joining us.
Hope to
conversation.
Hope to see you again next time.
Yeah.